We're all not that good. What we want to think. We have an animal desire for power. We have a cruel and aggressive side, which can cause great harm to others. And we tend to deny our shortcomings and weaknesses. And even if we deny it all, it doesn't disappear, but only plunges into the unconscious and accumulates in that, what Carl Jung called the shadow. In this video, we will look at, like a confrontation, shadow and integration of its elements into our personality, and healing the divided world of our personality. To cast a shadow, the object must block the passage of light. An object that casts our psychological shadow is our persona. Persona is a Latin word, denoting a mask, worn by the actor. In Jungian psychology, the persona represents a metaphorical mask which we wear in the social world. It's a set of character traits which we want to pass off to others as ourselves, or, as Jung persona writes, this is a kind of mask called from one side, make a certain impression on others, and on the other hand, hide the true nature of man. The formation of our personality occurs at an early age. What elements of our character receive family approval, peers and society as a whole, and which ones are rejected? We integrate good traits into our personality, and supposedly, we hide the bad ones behind this mask. Over time, however, so as not to feel like a fraud, most of us identify with our good side and begins to hide undesirable character traits, not only from others, but also from myself. These character traits are suppressed and accumulate in the unconscious, forming a shadow. The shadow is the lowest part of the personality, sum of all mental elements, which, due to their incompatibility with the conscious personality attitude, denied expression in life, and therefore they unite into a relatively autonomous breakaway personality with opposite tendencies in the unconscious, while suppressed character traits and inclinations, not just lying around somewhere in the unconscious. They act autonomously, hiding from the attention of consciousness. One of the ways to manifest a shadow is projection. When we perceive in other people, groups of nations, races or political parties those weaknesses, flaws and bad traits, which are within ourselves. Or as Jung put it, we still attribute to another person all those evil and low qualities which we don't like to admit in ourselves, and therefore are forced to criticize and attack him. Although essentially everything, this is what that a low soul emigrated from one person to another. The world is still full of scapegoats. Just like before he was deprived of witches and werewolves, elements of our shadow find their way into everyday life, influencing our mood and behavior as character traits, instincts and desires that we suppress, marinates in the unconscious, creating tension between our conscious personality and an autonomous shadow splinter personality. During times of stress or conflict, keep the doors of the unconscious closed. The shadow begins to show itself, often with devastating consequences. There are patients who brag that for them the shadow side does not exist. They assure us that they have no conflict, but they don't see at all what's in their way. There are other things of unknown origin, hysterical moods, sneaky tricks which they play on themselves and their neighbors, nervous inflammation of the stomach, pain in different places, irritability for no reason, and whole. So instead of denying the shadow, it would be much more useful for us to shed light on this dark side of our character. Confrontation with the shadow begins with recognizing its existence and awareness of that the personality we present to the world and our conscious sense of self do not fully reflect us. After accepting this fact, honest introspection and self-criticism, from which we were hiding, good and bad, will definitely manifest themselves in us if we want to live without self-deception. However, we cannot see all of our shadow, because some elements of our character are pushed back too far into the depths of the unconscious. And to discover these elements, we can use several different tactics. Firstly, you should pay attention to any that cause a particularly strong emotional reaction, because this is a sign that we have the same trait. Different tactics is to look into the shadow of someone close to us, which is usually easier than to look into your own. After all, much of it, what is deposited in it, is influenced by social and cultural trends, and therefore occurs in many members of our society. I came to a conclusion. What is the most individual thing in a person? Of course, is consciousness, but his shadow is much less individualized, and the reason is that man is different from his fellows, rather by your virtues than negative qualities. One of the many benefits of deeper cognition, its dark side is that it creates a contrast, which allows good sides of our character stand out from others, or, as Jung writes, when we face the shadow, we suddenly see both sides. We are aware not only of our moral inferiority, but also automatically your good qualities, and we say rightly, I can't be that bad. How can all this be contrasted with a person's shadow? It means showing him his own light. Confrontation with the shadow also reduces the ability of our shortcomings and weaknesses. Awareness of the problem of anger, selfishness, greed, aggression, obsessive obsessions gives us the ability to have some control. Then we can strive to overcome this deficiency, or at least minimize its potential damage, because the psychiatrist knows that some are dangerous. Unconscious forces can be made harmless, or at least keep it in check, if you make them conscious. That is, if the patient can assimilate them and integrate your personality. In the shadows, we also discover instinctive drives to aggression and power, which contain huge amounts of energy. If you realize these drives and sublimate them, that is, to put it at the service of higher goals, then they can give us strength, encouragement to take risks, and even spur our creativity. And the shadow contains not only animal instincts, flaws and weaknesses, it is also home for our character strengths, which we suppressed as a result of poor upbringing, adaptation to a sick society. For example, some people deny their intelligence, creative skills, decisiveness, or ability to act. No shadow consists only of morally reprehensible tendencies, but also shows a number of good qualities, such as normal instincts, appropriate reactions, realistic insight, creative impulses, and so on. From one side, shadow is a regrettable and reprehensible weakness. On the other hand, this is a healthy instinctiveness and prerequisite for a higher consciousness. To use the positive side of our shadow, something more is needed than just observing what hides in its depths. We must consciously integrate elements of our shadow into our character and allow them to manifest themselves in our daily lives. Acknowledging and accepting the shadow suggests something more than just a willingness to look at your dark brother and then return it to a state of suppression where he languishes like a prisoner in prison. On the contrary, it implies providing him freedom to participate in a person's life, reconnecting with the positive side of our shadow, minimizing the impact of its negative side, and integration. All this into our conscious sense of self creates character, striving for the ideal of integrity, which according to Jung, defines a psychologically healthy person. When we approach a state of wholeness, we become more attractive to other people. After all, people usually suspect those of dishonesty, who seems too good, and who is too much, clarifies himself with his personality. We understand that under the bright guise hides a dark and dangerous shadow. Therefore it is much more attractive, holistic character, whole person, who knows not only his own strengths, virtues and potential for good, but also your weaknesses, flaws and potential for evil. The shadow belongs to the whole personality. A strong person must be weak somewhere. A smart person must be stupid somewhere. Otherwise he's too good to be truthful and stoops to posturing and bluffing. When we meet the shadow, we remove our projections and stop. Constantly take out your rage on political opponents of representatives of another race, of religion, ethnicity or gender. To many people, see all the problems in society and other people, and yet they don't notice much more serious problem, which lies within themselves. They don't see that they are a character, divided into two parts, and until they face the shadow side, this will only increase hostility and division. Their personalities